Getting started with Azure Machine Learning Studio is a straightforward process if you know what to be looking for. In this case, I've opened the Azure portal. Now, I've recently created an Azure Machine Learning workspace. That's why you see that demo AutoML over there. But let's assume that you don't and you haven't before. If you search for just ML, one of the first services that will show up is the Azure Machine Learning. If you click that, or actually you can click on the drop down, you can create a new workspace and get started. So I'm going to click on Azure Machine Learning and I am going to create a new workspace. In this case, again, I already have one created from before, but I'm going to go through the steps of what that looks like if I'm getting started from scratch. So if you've never created anything or you don't have any workspace created from before, this will be empty and you won't have anything listed here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create here on the drop down, and you can see that I'll have two options. One is a new workspace and the other one is a new registry. If you're just getting started and you want to try out Azure Machine Learning and use the Azure Machine Learning Studio, which is the web interface for interacting with machine learning, then you will need to create a new workspace. Don't bother on creating the new registry. This is more of like a more advanced feature of Azure Machine Learning if you have multiple workspaces and you want to do other things there. So, okay, so let's go and click on new workspace and let's see what that looks like. All right, so it has automatically selected my subscription, and this is kind of like the same web interface, the web form that you will have to fill out when you're creating services in Azure. As you can see, I have to select my subscription and then either select an existing resource group or create a new one. I always tend to create a new one, especially when I'm doing demos or when I'm trying things out, because I prefix them with the word demo. So in this case, I am going to create a new one. I'm going to say demo, and I'm going to say ML Studio. So once I do that, this will create a new resource group. And if I click here, you can see that it will have the ability to select other ones existing. Like if I have other resource groups, I usually tend to create a new one. If you're just trying it out, this is a perfect way of actually creating this new resource group for your workspace. So let's take a look at the details now. Let's select a workspace name. I kind of tend to name my workspace names the same as the resource group. So in this case, I use demo ML Studio. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say ML Studio. And as I'm typing, you can see that certain things are getting populated: the storage account, Key Vault, and application insights. This is all very useful. And this is the automation. This is the highly specific environment that you're going to work with, because Azure Machine Learning Studio is specific for machine learning tasks, and this is the difference from just bringing up different virtual machines around Azure in other types of environments, because you're going to have to set up Key Vault, storage accounts, application insights. All those are done for you. Now, the one thing that is not done for you, but is actually very useful, and I'm not going to go through it, but still I'm going to go and mention it, is the container registry. Now, if you're going to be dealing with containers, which I highly suspect you're going to do that if you're going to be deploying some of these machine learning models to production, then you're going to want to create a container registry. And you can actually select one that is existing. I don't have anyone that I have previously created, but you can create a new one. That will allow you to push container images to that container registry that is associated with this workspace, and all of it will be more integrated and will make your life easier. I'm not going to do that because we're not going to be creating any containers for these demos. So I'm going to go ahead and say review and create. It will do some validation, make sure that all of the things that I've added in the form are okay. And once that completes, I'll be able to create this workspace, and then we'll have to wait a second for it to complete. All right, so validation passed. I'm going to click create. And this is going to initialize the deployment, submitting deployment in progress. So you'll see the status right here. So what does that mean? Like what's deployment in progress? Well, behind the scenes, Azure is creating all of the resources that we selected. Remember the Key Vault and the storage accounts? In this case, I didn't create a container registry, but if I was, then Azure would be creating those right here. So this will take a second, and we'll come back once it's completed. Okay, so this has completed, and you saw that there was a notification there, but essentially it tells us that we can now go to the resource. So I'm going to click here and go to resource, and then see what that is. Now we've created a workspace, and now we have the resource page. Now this is not Azure Machine Learning Studio. This is not the actual place where you will be interacting with Azure Machine Learning. This is kind of like a panel where you can set and do like overview, activity log, set access controls, do more about like tags, do a little bit about logs and networking. You're managing that, but it's not the actual place. This might be confusing if you never used Azure Machine Learning Studio, or if you're not aware how certain services work in Azure. Some services that have like a separate interface will have this landing page where you can do management, but the actual interaction with the service itself happens elsewhere. And where is it going to happen? Well, I'm going to keep scrolling here, and it's right here where you are launching Studio. So I'm going to click here and go to Azure Machine Learning Studio. So you can see that it opened a new tab over there, and now I'm greeted with this interface, which it might be a little bit overwhelming if you've never used this before, but it allows you to very easily access most of the features that you may want to use when you're dealing with machine learning. So right off the bat, you can see you have the ability to create anything that is new. Notebooks, automated ML, which is what we're going to try out today, and then Designer, which is a drag and drop user interface where you can create an interface for building machine learning pipelines. We're not going to do Designer today, but we're going to focus on automated ML. So how do you get started with AutoML? Well, you have the ability to go through here on this panel on the left and go through the different options. If you get lost, you're always able to come back to this screen by clicking on Home. You have Notebooks, Automated ML, which is what we're going to see today, Designer, which I mentioned we're not going to use today, and various different pieces of data that we definitely can investigate further. But you can get started with AutoML like clicking on this little Lightning logo, or go right here to Automated ML and start now, or create new and get started there. So all of those three options are valid. You can choose any, and I'll show you right here. You can start here with the Automated ML job. I'm gonna go and click on Start Now for Automated ML on this one right here, and then go through the process of creating a new run. So I don't have any previous automated ML jobs, so that's why there's this empty notice here saying I don't have anything. So yes, I want to create a new one, and let's go through the steps needed in order to find out what that looks like. So I'm going to click on Create New Automated ML Job, and then I'm going to go through all of these steps. So all the way from number 1 to number 5, we're going to skip on number 4 because we're not going to be doing computer vision today. I am going to be using a tabular dataset. If you have never worked with datasets before, or you're slightly confused as to what those are, don't worry, I'll explain what that looks like and how we can make it work. So the first thing that we need to do is select a data asset. Now, recently, Azure changed these before it didn't name them data assets. I tend to call them data sets because I'm going to be working with a comma separated value file. So I'm going to go ahead and add one. I don't have any. That's why this list or this box here is empty. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. This is a new, not a new, but like a very useful feature where you can, if you don't have anything, you don't have to jump to another page. You can do that right from here. So I'm going to click on Create, and I'm going to name it. So I have a data set for wine ratings from all over the world. So I'm going to call these wine ratings. and I'm gonna say the description is wine ratings from actually world wine ratings, and then that's a good enough description. Actually, we can add that from GitHub. There we go, and it's tabular. That's fine. I'm going to click create next and see what happens. And then I have several different options. You can see from Azure Open Datasets, these are pre-made and ready to use. Some popular datasets that are available here. We can even grab data from SQL databases, from local files if I want to upload something. Azure Storage, if I have already a blob of from Azure, I can use that, or I can use from web files. In this case, this is what I'm going to be using today, what I want to show you, because I feel like it is very incredibly useful to use web files. So I'm going to go and take you over to a different web page, a different window that I have open, and that is this GitHub repository where a while ago I created these wine ratings .csv. You can see here there's a Jupyter notebook, and I'm gonna be using these wine ratings .csv file. So I'm gonna click on that one. It says that it is too big to display it, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to click and view the raw one, and you can see there's lots of information here. Now, why did I click on viewing the raw? Because that is the exact URL that we will need. You can see here raw.githubusercontent.com, and the reason why we need the raw one is because if we go and use this one, I need to have the exact URL to the actual file, not the version that has the website from GitHub. So again, it is this is the URL that I want. I'm going to copy that, go back to Azure AutoML or Azure Machine Learning Studio where I'm creating the AutoML run. I'm going to click from web files. This is actually a web file. And then I'm going to click create on next, and then I'm going to paste that web URL. You can see that it is githubusercontent.com. I am not going to skip data validation. I'm going to let Azure try to validate that the data is correct, and I'm going to click on next. All right, so it did some validation there, and now there's a few settings and a brief preview of what that data set looks like. Right off the bat, you can see there's some problems. There's a weird column 1 there with some numbers. It looks like an index column. Grapes seem like they're all messed up because there's null all over the place. There's some other ones that look okay. There's red wine. Let's see if there's anything else there. There's a little bit of wine, and there are ratings numbers over there. So there's a little bit of descriptions. File format is telling me a little bit about the encoding, the delimiter. It asked me if I want to skip some rows, what are the headers, and yes, I do have some headers. And I am going to click on next so that you can see what else we can do with this. And this is the schema, and I really like this from Azure Machine Learning Studio, where we can start dropping things that are not interesting and we don't want to include when we're processing. So definitely the column 1 seems not useful at all, so I'm going to remove that. I am going to remove the name because for the type of machine learning operation that I'm going to do, I don't care about the name. The grape is all full of nulls, so that is not okay. So I'm going to remove that as well. Now, the region seems important. The variety, red wine or white wine, seems to be good, and the rating seems to be good. And then the notes is there's a lot of text, and I'm not going to use that. So these three, the region, the variety, and the rating, those are the ones that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to click on next. Perfect. So now we have our data set. We're ready to go. We're still creating the data set over here. I'm going to click on create. It's going to create the data set. It's going to get that in. But you can see that right away it doesn't show up here. So what's the deal? Well, this is why refresh. You need to actually click here so that it shows up. I click on refresh. Wine ratings appears. I'm going to select that. I'm going to click on next. and continue through creating the new automated ML job. All right, so I need to create a new experiment name. So I'm going to say AutoML experiment. You feel free to name it something that is more meaningful to you. In this case, we're just going to do a demo. So AutoML experiment sounds okay to me. Now the target column, what is that? Well, this is what the model that is going to be created is going to predict. Like, what do we want to predict? In this case, well, I want to give some options and I want to get a prediction on the rating. If I pass in a region, if I pass the variety, and I want to get the rating. So we want to know what this is actually called a label, and region and variety will be the features. So ratings, that's what I want the model to predict. And then I'm going to have to select a compute. What's the compute? Well, let's click here in the drop-down menu, and you can see here that I have either compute cluster or compute instance, but I don't have anything. No compute clusters found. So what do I do there? Well, I want to use a cluster. You could use a single instance. I want to use a cluster because I want to parallelize the operation. So what do I do here? Well, similarly as the dataset, I'm going to create a new. I have this ability to create new and then not get away from this configuring my automated ML job. I can come back. So I'm going to click on new. And this interface loads where I'm asked to create the cluster, or like if it was an instance, it would be the same. I have to define what's the location, and this is a trick to use either dedicated versus low priority. Low priority would allow you to do it for much cheaper. So I'm gonna select low priority. You'll see how some of these prices will change. If I click low priority, well, you'll see now that this is very, very, very low. That's $0.01 per hour. So that's 1 cent per hour for just a standard 2 gigabytes of RAM. But if I were to click on dedicated, you will see that well, that same machine doesn't show up, but you can see that the prices are significantly higher. For this type of machine learning operation, well, I'm going to click on low priority. Let's see if we have some options for doing GPUs. And for GPUs, I do have some options there. So I am going to be, well, I actually don't seem to have enough on this subscription to I don't have enough quota for the machine, for the virtual machines that I'm being selected. So that's fine. And that's something that you'll have to make sure that you do have an available quota. So, all right, so I'm going to keep on with CPUs. I'm going to check on low priority. And because I'm using low priority, I have the capacity to spend a little bit more. Let's see what is going to have here. So it doesn't seem that I have quota for that. So let's, I'll make some changes and come back. All right, because low priority is something that it makes it available depending on different various things like location and what type of virtual machine type I have. It doesn't seem like there's anything that Azure can provide me at this point in time. So I'm gonna click on dedicated and make sure that I just use some of these recommended options. So let's see if we can just use a little bit. Let's see, we have 14 gigs of RAM. That looks like a good one. I'm gonna select this one. It's 29 cents an hour. I'm gonna click on next. And then I want to have, well, one node sounds okay. It seems that I don't have the ability to run more nodes because it has six cores, and that's the maximum quota. And I'm gonna say that this is a CPU cluster, although it's going to be a single node. That's fine. Depending on your quota, you might have the ability to run more nodes or less nodes depending on the number of cores. Now, you can enable some more advanced settings, virtual network, managed identity, enable SSH access. I don't need SSH access. This is all good. You will see that I don't really need to interact with that. So I'm going to click on create, and this is going to take a second to create this dedicated virtual machine just for AutoML. All right, so it seems that completed, and now we have our experiment name, we have the target column, we have selected the compute type, which is a cluster, which is really just a single node cluster. Now we need to select the Azure ML compute cluster. I'm going to click here, and you can see my CPU cluster is ready to go. So I'm going to select that one and click on next. All right, so what type of machine learning model we're going to be working with? Well, we have several options here. You can see it starts with classification, regression, time series, NLP, and computer vision. But in this case, Azure has detected correctly that we're going to predict continuous numeric values. We're going to do a regression task. So because we're going to be predicting the ratings, so that the wine ratings, that's a perfect job for regression. So we're going to click on next, and then we're going to do what type of validation type. Auto sounds okay, and no test data asset required. I'm not going to do any test data asset. I'm going to skip that. I click finish, and this is going to create a new AutoML job. Now, I want to show you one thing that you might run to if you did everything exactly like that, like I did. Now, this by default will try to find everything for a very long while. We'll try to do several different algorithms to try to find what the best models are, and the models will start showing up here once this starts going on. But I want to show you something that I missed and I didn't add. So if I click edit and submit preview, well, actually preview is that it's a preview feature. If I click on this and I go next, and I go next again, there are additional configuration settings that I didn't do the first time around. So I'm going to click on those, and then you will see that this very useful page shows up with several different key features that you might be interested in. The first one, well, it tells you what's the primary metric, normalized root mean square error. That sounds fine. What models do I want to be using? Yes, I want to use all of the supported ones, but the exit criterion is crucial. If I click here, you'll see that the training job time in hours will be 6. That means that for that previous job to complete, it'll take 6 hours. Well, I am going to change this to just 0.5. And then that will mean that I'll have to wait half an hour to come back and then have those. Like, depending on the resources that you have, and depending on the amount of budget that you want to provide for something like this will mean that it will take, for me, 30 minutes before it gives up and it stops trying more more models, more algorithms to create models and see if there's new ones that might meet that threshold. You can also use a metric score threshold, which is, you can say for the root mean square error, you might say, well, this is my value, and then you can set that up. And finally, concurrency. I don't have more than one node, but you can certainly change that. And actually, the concurrency is for the same. You can use it actually in the same machine as well. So training job in time hours 0.5. I'm going to say save, and I click next. And all of this is fine, so I'm going to click finish, and it's going to create a new automated ML job. So this is great. It hasn't started, but I want to show you what the jobs are. So I'm going to click here on automated ML, and you can see there's one that is already running. I'm going to stop that one because I don't want that running, because it's going to take 6 hours. So I'm going to click on cancel, and yes, I'm going to cancel that job. And this is going to take a couple of minutes to take effect. So why did I do this? Why did I show you all of this process and then went back? Well, because you might be getting into a situation where you're missing some of the steps, and I missed them on purpose, and then you would like to know how to get back. Well, that is exactly what you will need to do. And that's a feature of being able to come here and easily do that edit and submit and see what's going on. So if I go back to automated ML, you can see that this is running. It's been running for 45 seconds. So now we'll wait to see when this completes and go and browse the results. All right, so our AutoML job has completed. You can see here that the status is completed. Let me actually try to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So it's completed. It took about like a little bit over 30 minutes, and the reason why is because there was a setup time. Remember, it was trying to set up the run, so it took setting up the run, installing everything that it needed, took like around 9 minutes, and then 30 minutes of trying to process everything that is needed. Okay, so what would you do with this? Like, it's done. Like, what does it mean? Right. So let's click on here, and then we go to the status, right? So experiment timeout reached, hence experiment stopped, current experiment timeout 0 hours and 30 minutes. Okay, that sounds okay. That's what we want. We want it to stop at 30 minutes. We see that there's an overview. It tells us how much it took and what was the compute target. Well, it was our CPU cluster. It used normalized root mean square error. The sampling was 100%, no models registered. So a lot of extra information about what is it that we did. But where's the interesting thing? Well, let me show you. It is right here on the models. So I'm going to click here on models, and you can see that the voting ensemble is the one that kind of like had the best, is the best model that was picked for what we wanted to do. So you can actually see the explanation. So you can see a lot of the data that was actually produced. So you can see region. Remember, the wine data set that I chose had region, and it had variety. There were some other things there, column 2 and 3. Those don't matter. And let's see model performance. That sounds good. Now, one thing that I wanted to show you is the metrics. So I've clicked on metrics here, and the metrics will show us, and I know some of these numbers and some of these values will show small, but I wanted to, actually I think I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see. So what I wanted to show you is the residuals. You'll get the histogram, and you can see what that graph looks like, and then the predicted versus true value and the average, and you can see that this is very, very good. The average predicted value versus the ideal one, they're very closely related. So that's great, and you can see the wine rating values right here, right? So we have very few on the 97 to 98 range, and quite a few on the 90 versus, let's see, 90 to 92 wines, like rated wines. That the wine ratings go from around mid to high 80s all the way to 100, and the wealth of the wines are going to be right in this range. So very good. Lots of information, mean absolute percentage, absolute error. A lot of you can even create custom charts, which is actually pretty good. You can also see the outputs and logs. You can see what was it to actually go and train these and get some information there. But finally, I want to show you this thing, which is the view generated code. If you know a little bit of Python, this will create a notebook, a Jupyter notebook, with all of the information that you need, including the actual link of the AutoML run, the prerequisites. You can actually get this to create a compute instance here at the top, and make that attached to a compute instance and start running this notebook and interacting with it. You can see here everything has been pre-populated for me: the subscription ID, resource group, workspace name. It creates the project directory, and it uses an existing compute target or creates a new one. So if you want to start deploying this and trying it out, it will be able to definitely use this notebook to try it out, and you can configure it and run it, and it goes on and on to eventually try this model out. Let me see if we can gain a little bit more of insights on how we can actually interact with this model. So it will use MLflow, which is a popular machine learning platform, and it will download the fitted model, which is the model that was generated. I'm gonna keep scrolling. well, actually, this won't show me exactly how to interact with it. But one thing that we can do, and I'm going to scroll all the way very fast. I'm going to actually go back. One thing that we can do is, I'm going to select the model again. We can actually deploy it. So I can click here and we can actually say, well, I want a web service from this or a real-time endpoint. So this is from the model that I chose that I think it's pretty good. Azure suggested that this would be the one that I should actually pick and choose, but I'm happy to, or I'm given the chance, the opportunity to choose anything else, and I can choose either a real-time endpoint or a web service. So let's see a real-time endpoint. What would that look like? Well, the thing is that I can just say, well, I want it publicly available, manage or Kubernetes, and then it's next, and it will be very easy to just use Kubernetes or a container instance and then make these publicly available. So that's it. I'm not going to go through the deployment process, but it does show you how powerful this is to create a model without knowing too much about machine learning specifics, making it very easy to create a compute. Let's actually go to compute over here, and you will see that the compute cluster that we created in the beginning is right there. And once you're done, well, now it's scaled down to 0 nodes, but we can actually go ahead and delete it because we're done with our demo. We're done with creating these models. So that's it. That's Azure Machine Learning Studio, a brief introduction which allows you to do AutoML or automated machine learning to create some powerful models with machine learning with Azure.